Welcome back. 400 students allegedly involved in a raucous riot at a Queens high school last week. And you might have seen the social media videos that have been going all over social media and on platforms, as well as news sources. We're blurring all of the students' faces. But reportedly, the reason for the riot is because students found out that one of their teachers there, who happens to be Jewish, attended a pro-Israel rally.
And that school and the incident itself is now the subject of a federal Department of Education investigation. Let's let our News Nation newsmakers have their say. Today we have Asia Grace, Kurt Bardella, and Rena Shah. Kurt, let me just start with you. This is obviously the latest flashpoint in tensions in the wake of this war. Just your top line thoughts, if you'll kick us off here. I mean, she changed her face, the teacher changed her Facebook profile to a photo of her, holding a sign that says, "I stand with Israel." And now you have violence in the halls of this school. Your initial thoughts here after seeing this footage?
This is absolutely ridiculous. We live in a country where we have the freedom to express ourselves, the freedom of association, the right of free speech. What we do in our non-work time is no one else's business. And it certainly has nothing to do with the job of being a teacher. You are allowed to associate and express and protest and demonstrate and support and rally and whatever you want to do in your own time. This wasn't a school function that she was at. This wasn't endorsed by the school that she teaches at. This is not part of her curriculum that she's imposing on her students. Those would all be things that I would understand protesting about if I'm a student. This is someone in their own time exercising their constitutional rights. The idea that that would be protested is downright un-American.
But we've seen protests over the course of the past few years for all kinds of things, including students who were upset over COVID mandates, students who were upset because of political causes. Asia, how did we get here where these young people believe that a riot is justifiable because one of their teachers? I mean, I have some commentaries. We have notes from these students who organized this, what was supposed to be a peaceful protest, and they said that some kids just didn't get the memo.
100%. I mean, listen, this is all born out of TikTok, if I must say. I mean, TikTok to these kids is like Ozempic shots to like the Real Housewives, okay? Like they got to be on it. They got to be on the bend of the wave because they want to be involved in this kind of mob mentality. I'd venture to say that more than half of the members of this riot, they didn't have a vested interest in the unrest. They just wanted to be a part of something. They wanted to have, a hand or a moment on social media or in the video of just, being a rebel without a cause. These rebels were not doing it for a cause. They were doing it for clout. And that's why we continue to see these kind of crazy things happening where these teens are rushing to something to be involved rather than to really make an impact.
Yeah, and Rena, Mayor Eric Adams calling this a vile show of anti-Semitism. Some of the kids did engage in violence. They threatened her, not only at the school, but online as well. She's getting vile threats. And to Kurt's point earlier that we're allowed to protest here, is there any form of protest that these kids could have participated in that wouldn't have been seen as anti-Semitic and would have been allowed in those school hallways for their difference of opinions, or no?
There's so much to unpack here because of the moment we're sitting in. The Anti-Defamation League has told us that there's been an uptick, something like 400% rise in violent incidents towards Jewish Americans, and that is not okay. And our history should guide us here. Our world history, the fact that Jewish Americans have this very recent history of loss related directly to who they are as people. What is woven into the fabric of our Constitution here, the right to exercise your religion and do so without fear of persecution. And I think what we're seeing here, with all due respect, is rebels with a cause. These are people that have been fed so much misinformation. The disinformation that comes out of TikTok and other social media platforms has led to these youth violently now expressing what they feel is a very anti-Jewish sentiment. And look, how do we get out of this moment? I mean, there's a lot lot of ways we can, and we're not even at the beginning of that yet, because I think the situation right now in New York City with this school violence, these youth essentially lashing out this way, epitomizes why we need to teach civics in school again. Peaceful protest is the cornerstone of what we have in this nation, in our guiding documents, what we're founded upon. And I think this moment is not just ugly for people on both sides, and I don't want to all sides this in any way. There are Muslim Americans who are very scared. There are, again, Jewish Americans that fear persecution, and everything that's happening between Israel and Hamas has made it here in a way that I believe is dangerous. And the danger really is the misinformation, disinformation being thrown at American youth from social media platforms.
Well, arguably, there has been a lot of disinformation for so many years ahead of the fateful day of October 7th. And I think a lot of Americans fear for our young people and what kind of future they have.
One thing, too, that I just want to point out real quick. Like,
yes, quickly.
You asked a second ago, like, where do these kids get this example from? In the last 2 weeks, we have seen in the United States Congress, a U.S. Senator challenge a witness to a fistfight. We have seen a member of Congress accuse the former Speaker of the House of kidney punching him or elbowing him in the kidney. We had an insurrection on January 6th. It's like, yeah, is it any wonder why kids think that maybe violence and this type of protesting is the answer? The leaders of our land are conducting themselves this way.
Yeah, well, we could also argue that there were riots and demonstrations in the streets that turned violent for many different causes, even in the past few years for several communities, and that also was an example. Let's get to this next topic, Elon Musk and him traveling to Israel. Of course, this was a big story. He even offered to provide Starlink satellite access for Israel to protect the country. And obviously, he witnessed some of the horrors. I saw pictures of him staring at the image of a baby's crib filled with blood. He was told by Prime Minister Netanyahu that this is the crib of a child who was murdered by Hamas fighters. Obviously, this follows comments that some people took issue with. Rena, is he overcorrecting, or is he showing true colors?
Elon Musk is an enigma wrapped in a mystery, if you ask me. He's just somebody that you can't quite figure out, and that's okay. Yeah. Look, I myself have served activist CEOs that desire to do things one way or the other. Do I think this is a good move for Elon Musk? Absolutely not. Do I sympathize with the Israeli people? Yes. Do I support the Israeli government, meaning Benjamin Netanyahu? Absolutely not. And I think Elon Musk doing this is a bad move for business. I mean, Twitter has already been hemorrhaging not just profits and funds, but they've lost tons of advertisers. So what's the point in going to do this? I totally see these scenes and my heart melts, because what happened at these kibbutzes is just absolutely horrific. And the violence now that feels normalized in these multiple wars in the Eastern Hemisphere, it's just something that doesn't strike the American consciousness. But Elon Musk doing this, again, just a bad move. And I don't know that he's really the kind of person that is worth the leadership qualities that many people in the business community have worshipped for years. I just find him to be, again, a person that kind of goes with the wind. And I just don't think we ought to be paying attention to him because he does things for clicks.
And, Rena, you bring up the business side of things. Asia, I'm curious what you think. Would we see, I don't know if you want to call this an apology tour. I don't know what it is, but would we have seen this visit from him to Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu had it not been for the fact that he could lose $75 million in ad revenue over this? Apple, who else? Disney suspended their ads on X in the wake of his comments. Do you think this is an about-face only because of business?
I 100% do. I mean, this is Elon Musk. Keep that ad coin coming, Musk. Okay, like I think he is on the side of the dollar sign. Okay, and I truly believe that once he saw that people were calling him under into question and things were being placed under fire, he quickly moonwalked his way back on anything that might have even been slightly questionable. And now with 75 million plus in the balance, oh, my guy might start Harlem shaking around the world in order to get people back in his good graces and get back in those pockets. So I do think this was an attempt to maybe try to win the people back, and we'll see if it works.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who actually love and fawn over Elon Musk and his tweets and his comments. So obviously a divided perspective across the country and around the world as to whether he's showing who he really is through those meetings with President Herzog as well as Prime Minister Netanyahu, and of course those ad revenues at risk. Let's talk about Instagram's algorithm, because there was this new Wall Street Journal report, and Kurt we want to start here with you, that basically put a hypothetical situation in play, right? They set up a test where an account that specifically followed gymnasts, cheerleaders, and teen influencers, and found that those who followed these kinds of accounts were often taken down this rabbit hole of overtly sexual and inappropriate material. What should Meta's response be, especially as major advertisers are often seen in the mix with social media?
Yeah, they need to change their algorithm and they need to own this. This is not done in a vacuum. This is done by design. These are the most sophisticated, technology driven companies in the world. They know exactly what they're doing. They know that their product is addictive. They know that what the content and the way that they represent it and present it to their audience is done so that it is tailored in a way that keeps you hooked on it, that your screen time on these platforms goes up. That's how they make money. That's how they get ad dollars. That's how they sell other brands and products to go put their ad dollars with them. And it's very concerning. We live in a time now where, as we talked about in that first part of this segment, where these kids are glued to their phones all day, every day, and they are making decisions about their own self-worth, their own mental health, their own body image, their own political beliefs based on the things that are being serviced to them by these algorithms. And the fact that you could follow, if you're a 12-year-old who's just started cheerleading in your high school and you follow a cheerleader maybe at Alabama or Georgia that you like, and then you start getting serviced a bunch of sexually explicit content or sexually suggestive content, because that's how these things work, that's disturbing and terrifying, and something needs to be done about it.
And some of these videos, you know, they're horrifying. There was one, I mean, this is graphic, but just to point out the type of videos that some of these kids, even adults, are getting, there was a video after an ad for visiting Disneyland, a video that played of a daughter performing sex acts on her father. I mean, these are the kinds of videos that people are getting fed. So is there actually, Rena, I mean, somebody at Meta in a department who is saying, you get a video, you get a video? And what's the end game here other than just keeping people glued for one more minute?
Yeah, it's hard to tell what Meta is doing internally because there's been so much that's changed over there, particularly in the past 7 years. And look, anybody that thinks that Mark Zuckerberg and his wife are these great philanthropists who are really making society better is dead wrong. I think he is one of the biggest threats to democracy, and they put a veneer of everything philanthropic on everything they do. Meta is garbage. I myself have disabled my own Facebook profile in 2011 after receiving some cyberbullying type of activities myself. I was in my 20s at that time. I meet women all the time in their 30s and 40s. They're highly addicted to social media. That is what it's meant to do. So the very fact that many of these women and men allow their children who are not even age 13 yet to have their own profiles, to have this smartphone in their hand where they are constantly getting dopamine hits and exposure to the nastiest of the nastiest type of content that one can't even imagine. Of course, when I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, right, I could get to that stuff on my desktop computer, but it was multiple clicks away.
Everybody can get to
right
it.
There.
It's not just Meta. It's not just TikTok. You can go on YouTube and be taken down different rabbit holes. So clearly, technology is advancing rapidly and content is advancing rapidly. And somewhere we have to kind of find out what the button is, what the stopgap measure is to be better gatekeepers. Kurt Bardella, Asia Grace, Rena Shah, thank you all for being with us today.